everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training at fmtraining.tv, where every day we're doing great different things with the FileMaker platform, and we're always learning from each other. A lot of you who are tuning in, I've learned a great deal from you, and I'm trying to, maybe help educate some people who haven't had the opportunity to roll out a big FileMaker project with a brand new FileMaker customer. So before we get going, let's take a look at fmtrain.tv. It's kind of headquarters for us. The title of today really should be where the rubber meets the road, right? That's what this is all about today. It's where you take a FileMaker solution and you roll it to the customer. And it's not just kind of a one-shot thing and you're done. It takes some effort, ongoing effort. It's not instantaneous overnight. So that's today. The next week, we got the return of Nick. Nick will be back working on modernization of the project. If you want to make sure, a reminder of everyone that while the training is free and we do a lot of great training here, Leland Long and all these people, and Nick, they all kind of somehow need some sort of compensation. And that comes from you purchasing one of our training bundles. So if you go to fmtrain.tv, you scroll down to the tabs, Margaret, you scroll to the top and then kind of show them how they get to the tabs there.
Yep.
So the live training tab is on the left. And then the third from the left is bundles. And one of those training bundles helps fund and keep the operation running. If you want to quit sharing your screen real quick, I'm going to pivot today to an important conversation. A lot of you are on in-house developers, so a lot of this will still apply to you. So let's do that. I'm going to share. I guess I should share my screen. The bullshit title of this live stream is called Onsite Considerations for Successful Deployment of FileMaker Deployments. This is actually really realistically where the rubber meets the road. And so the idea is that you build a FileMaker solution and you have to get it in front of the customers and they have to be successful with it. It's an essential part of it. Just building it is, I don't even know, half the effort. I would say less than half the effort. So let's talk about that. Let's go forward a little bit. So today's broadcast and conversation is absolutely for beginning developers, intermediate developers. If you're a senior developer, you should know everything in here. It's very, very important that you know all this. You should know this. If you're a brand new developer, take notes and listen carefully and play this back a couple of times. Help yourself out, because you can either learn this the easy way from me, or you can learn it the hard way when your customer is very agitated and angry at you. You have a choice. It's not like you can just avoid today's conversation. And it's not even really, today is not even really technically a well, part of it's FileMaker, but really this applies to any technology. FileMaker just makes this what we're going to pull off much more doable, much more easier, but it could go for any platform where you're rolling something out to a customer that has a need. So moving forward, so building a good app does not make you successful, right? Just building high quality apps on a platform does not guarantee success. Using the FileMaker platform in a lot of ways helps move you towards success in a meaningful way. And I mean that very seriously, but just like I'm building an app and it's done in FileMaker and I'm good. That doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, you need to be successful. What is success? It's not building a good app. Success is having a customer adopt it and use it, and not only use it, but they're kind of happy to use it, right? And if they're happy to use it, that means that the managers feel that they got value for their investment. The workers are feeling like their jobs are easier and more satisfying and less crappy and maybe stuck in the minutia of doing paperwork. And that's kind of what today's situation is about here, and we'll talk about that as we go. So today's conversation is really about everything you do kind of, for the most part, after you build kind of your early cut of the product, your early version of the product, then you got to get it in the customer's hands. So along the way, we have questions you definitely should make sure you ask me. So in a small business environment or a work group, like large corporation, but a work group, so you have a work group of 20 or 30 people or something like that in a large corporation, that's essentially a small business. You might not think about that yourself as small business, but really the end of your work group, your entire team is very small. So that's what we're talking about. Agile development methodology, right? Customer-facing agile development methodology. So you build the first crack of this application, you get it in their hands. And every time you interact with the customer, and I've been personally doing this these last 2 or 3 weeks, every time you interact with the customer sees previously discovered bugs that you've corrected and remediated. They're also going to see new features and capabilities that you haven't built before for them, new things, right? In fact, that already happened this morning here with these guys. We found some bugs yesterday, which are really interesting. We'll talk about those, and that's why I remediated those last night. Came in today, they're running, and then I'm sure there'll be some sort of discovery of some gee whiz thing they need to have. So we got that. Getting you in feedback early is important, right? So the agile development methodologies, you build it, you get early feedback, you iterate. So you fix previous feedback and you take the next step forward. So every time the customer interacts with you, they've got new plus bug fixes on the previous feedback that you've given them. Very, very, very important. For some organizations, the exercise in customer feedback is nothing more than an opportunity for the customer event for them to feel better, right? And but really at the end of the day, when you interact with a customer, you're trying to, especially, and we'll get this next slide, but you're trying to get feedback from them. You're trying to understand their tone and attitude. Are they feeling satisfied with how things are going? It's very, very important. So as you move towards being successful with your project, even if you're an in-house person and you're working with your team, you want to make sure they're happy with what you're doing, right? I mean, some people, it's a new concept, right? But if you're building customer-facing software, or you're building aircraft for them, or you're doing whatever you're doing, you want to make sure the customer fundamentally is happy with you. There are major corporations and people who forget this basic fact. They lose sight of that part of it, and then they suffer because of that. And so once again, I'm trying to help all of you. I knew this, and then over the last month, I've kind of rediscovered bits and pieces of it. I've kept myself off the rocks. We can talk about that. Cool. So let's talk about this next thing. So fundamental concept. People are hired to be a custom app. Their lives are already completely overloaded and messed up. So fundamentally, their organization has pain. It's overworked, overstressed. They don't have enough staff, etc. That the only reason people go out and spend money is either because it's a luxury item, they want it, or they have pain, they have a headache, and they're taking some Advil or Tylenol or something to get rid of the pain. FileMaker is a pain medication at the business level is what it is. And so understand the people, when they come to you to hire you to bring you in-house, they hire you internally, maybe like a Kyle Williams or someone, or you're outside like us, they're going to bring you in because they have a pain and they need it fixed. The reason they're hiring is because they want to reclaim it, invest time, wasted time. It gets this fundamental idea that they don't have the time to actually sit there and babysit the process with you, like do testing. So this always comes up. People always say, well, this application wasn't really well tested. So there's a couple strategies with this. One is that there are some consultants out there, and I cover this on the next slide, but fundamentally you can either have a training person that works at your consultancy or works on your team that tests the software before the customer gets it. That does have value, because the very worst tester for software is the guy who wrote it, the lady who wrote it, the person who wrote it. It doesn't matter. Whoever writes it is frequently incapable of testing it in a reasonable sort of way, because they've been getting it to work from the sausage making all the way out. And they don't have the ability to kind of sometimes see the trees through the forest, right? That kind of thing. So having someone on staff to test it is good to a degree, but that has super big limitations. So understand that your end customer is not going. They're calling you in, whether you're in-house developer or out-house developer, outside consultant. That they're not going to have the time to really sit and pontificate and spend 2 or 3 hours a day going, well, it'd be really great if it did this, really great if this, and then they're busy doing their jobs. They don't have time to do this. So what you can do is you can slowly roll out the solution to them, solving one piece at a time, one problem at a time, and slowly thread your way into their lives, and they test it. And it's not a huge thing. They test a little bit, they start using it. And then at some point they start to smile, they start to become happy. Things are going their way because they're starting to see the benefit of what you're doing. This is the really rewarding part of the job, is when you start to see the happiness and the time savings and return on investment that they're getting. Really, really great. So once again, if you have a small deployment, a small team, say less than 50 people, a lot of times just rolling it out slowly, letting them solve little problems. They can continue to do their other processes the way they've always done. So in some ways, it's like double double paperwork, right? They're doing the new system that you built plus whatever old system they built. In the case of this customer here, they were a paper operation, still to this day a paper operation. So FileMaker in a paper operation is like shooting fish in a barrel. It's like the ROI is so huge. It's like, pow, right? So it's awesome. So the customers are going to fundamentally resist. These aircraft are already due. A couple of them are late. They need to get them banged down. So they don't have time just to stop and say, let's work on our software. It's never going to happen, right? Testing and workflow, right? There's a lot of text in here. I'm just going to run through this real quick. So when you do testing, and this is why having an in-person testing, it has limited utility, and we kind of get this at the bottom here, but essentially when they do testing, they talk to you, however they did this, maybe record it, maybe they drew some pictures and wireframes, whatever. They're testing to see if they understand your the user experience that you've crafted for them. They are testing it to see if it makes sense in their mind, okay? And you can be there with them, and I highly recommend being there with them to help guide them through if they get stuck or something. But largely, if you build a great interface, and once again, Nick is a big proponent, big fan of that, and he's here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you build a good interface with a good user experience, those are two different things, then that helps the customer feel better and helps educate them on how the process works, because they understand how it works on paper. They don't necessarily understand how it works in the computer, but if you make it simple enough, they can follow along with that instruction manual. So the testing that you're going to do with them on a day-to-day basis or every other day or whatever schedule you establish, for me, it's every day here. You're looking to see that they understand the workflow of what you're proposing and that it actually meets their needs. Those are the two things that your testing person that works inside your company can't do. So there's some consultancy out there that, you hire them, and for every development hour, they're going to charge you a huge number, like $400 or $500 or something. And what that does, it buys you an hour of development plus probably some project management time by another person who isn't the coder, and it also buys you some testing time by someone who doesn't know what the business does. And so for some organizations, they make that work. I'm not going to call anyone out. They're successful companies in their own right. That being said, I have heard horror stories about people doing testing who don't understand the business, people project managing who don't understand the business. And this helicopter is not the same as working on a car. It's no matter where you're at, unless you're in the middle of the jungle and in the Congo, someplace in Africa, in which case there are no regulations on how helicopters are maintained. Anywhere else where you're probably watching this, there's big time federal regulations within your government, whatever government you're at, about how this is done and how it's documented and what the minimum standards are. And so you have to understand it. If you don't understand it, you can't build the software to support them, right? So that kind of gets back to this issue of meeting the customer and getting with them directly. So your testing staff will not necessarily guarantee that you're going to be successful when you build it. Your testing staff tests it. It worked. You have to click the button, it happened. Then you take it to the on-site, and the people behind you are losing their minds because it makes no sense, right? So it's very, very important. Being on site with a customer, I think, has tremendous value. You cannot do everything through Zoom, okay? You need to have a persistent presence within an organization, especially as they begin to use it, because you can't see this. I'm going to turn this around a little bit here. I'm going to grab the camera. So we have behind me, you have maintenance there. Then I'm going to kick this out of the way. I'm going to pivot the screen here. We see, and I can go full screen here if you guys want to see this real quick. So this is the facility here. And back inside there, there's more. Back in there, the windows back in there, there's management teams in there. I'm surrounded by people working on these aircraft, right? There's management team in there, and they're working on the software too, right? So it's very important that as they're interacting with it, you're there kind of behind them to take notes, to see where they get stuck. And what happens is they're not going to call you on Zoom or communicate with you on the phone or whatever the hell you want to use, Slack or something, until they're kind of agitated, right? It's like they want to do it themselves. They have an expectation. They paid good money for this. It should work. And you, because you were listening to me or you have lots of experience yourself, understand that there are limitations to how much you're going to get this right on the first pass. And so I knew that I was not going to get this. 33 years of combat experience, I knew I wouldn't get this right on the first pass. And they kept saying, well, we just want to use it, and we'll just use it ourselves, and then we'll let you know. It's like, I get that, but what I would do, I'd kind of sit in the back of the room and watch. And if they're trying to click on something and it gets a little frustrating, then it gives you an opportunity to intervene, right? Or to provide a little bit of guidance, or at a minimum, make some notes if you got to fix, right? And so such a huge deal to have some presence, because the customer will start to vibrate and get unhappy with you long before they call and reach you out on Zoom. So being in person allows you to remediate the issues faster, to be more responsive, to do the same day, same hours, same whatever. Otherwise, it might be the end of the day where they're going to call you back on Zoom, and by that time they're already agitated and pissed off. And how come this didn't work the first time? We've all been there when that stuff happens. It's not a lot of fun. You people think this is a joke. This is huge, absolutely huge. Especially if you're trying to understand the business process. It's a really, really big deal. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about FileMaker here. So because this is kind of a FileMaker training operation. And we have questions along the way, Margaret, feel free to intervene with me. So FileMaker allows you to be on site and allows you to remediate in real time, right? I think a lot of other platforms, they're really you can have a excessively lightweight platform that doesn't have the depth that you can get to where you want to be. I think one of the issues here with FileMaker and other competing products and being on site and doing all this is you don't want to you won't want the customer to get ahead of steam, and you understand what I'm saying, ahead of steam, where they're actually agitated and angry about something. You want to intervene quickly and rapidly and fix the issue quickly and rapidly. Most of the competing platforms out there can't actually solve the problems, or they're sufficiently complicated that it's not easy. You can't remediate it in 30 minutes or an hour or something, or 2 hours. We're going to talk about this issue here, very specific about the FileMaker platform here. And what you don't want to do is go into the customer and you let them get angry, get ahead of steam, or have to tell them no. And if you tell them no, so far I've had to tell these guys no on one thing, because and it was poor Paul over here behind me. He wanted some little piece of interface change color so you could see it better, but because of the way FileMaker you build it, you can't color one side of the portal one way and another side of the portal of the actual frame a different color. And so that's kind of I've had to say one no so far, right? But you want to minimize the no's. And so FileMaker overall has the horsepower, has the capability, he gets you to the finish line. And at the same time, you want to be around in person to make sure that the customer is motoring along in a nice, smooth fashion, and they're not sitting there kind of, like, I'm not going to use FileMaker. I'm going to go work on this, and then they'll get done. They're going, I'm going to go back to paper because that's what I've been using for 30 years, right? That's you're trying to avoid that, right? Because remember, success is not you building it. Honestly, let me help you out, some of you. No one gives a shit you built it, okay? What they care about is that they're using it and they're deriving benefit and they have a smile, right? So it's not about building it, okay? Building it is an essential part of it, but it's not the completed project. So FileMaker allows us to remediate this stuff, which is really great. One other consideration here, and we talk about this a little bit, some of you will build a solution for someone. In fact, most cases, well, not all most cases, it's a probably a mix, that the customer already has FileMaker experience. If they already have FileMaker experience, then they already kind of understand kind of the idea, if I say the idea of record locking and two people bouncing into each other on a record lock, okay? And so being in person so much on a customer that already has a lot of FileMaker experience is maybe not as essential. In this situation, they're going from paper to technology, one, huge shift. Two, they're using FileMaker, have no idea. The idea of what a record lock is and how that could even be a thing is a foreign concept, complete foreign concept. And so as a result, being in person when you have a customer who doesn't have the experience is really, really important. So once again, expect a higher degree of hand-holding. Once again, I recommend in person if you can swing it. If the person's 500 miles away, that's not going to be super doable. Although sometimes a customer will pay to have someone come out and to actually be with them for a week or two. That happens with our engineers periodically. They go on site with a customer to get them through some sort of big crisis, or they have some big trade show event or something, and know there's going to be a lot of FileMaker stress, and they want to make sure that you're right there with them on the job in the trenches solving the problems. That can be super, super helpful. And as we come into this, we'll talk more about FileMaker things, the status toolbar, right? The status toolbar. That's kind of another kind of religion in the FileMaker platform, like having a data separation model, right? There's people who love it because theoretically it compensates for issues in FileMaker, which are really not issues anymore, but they love it because someone else told them it was great, and they're like emotionally, religiously invested in this design theology. I don't like it because it's complicated, and that's, in my opinion, unnecessarily. Well, the status toolbar is another one of those things. I think we're kind of into the slideshow here, right? The short version of, if I go to FileMaker, where's it at? The status toolbar across the top, right? Brand new people, that's an invitation for all sorts of mayhem on the top of the screen right here. That is potentially very dangerous. So the issue you're going to have, or you're going to think about, is that do you want to train them in the status toolbar or somehow manage that? Now, in the case of the initial rollout here, I think the status toolbar has tremendous value after you get past the very basics of using the FileMaker platform. What I told them is that they tend to make the screen, do this full screen thing like this. You probably can see the full screen. And I told them, just please disregard the top inch of this thing. I said, as you use the product, you'll want to play with this, but initially you don't need it, right? You're not going to need that. And so, but the very first 5 minutes, I turned them loose in here and they promptly up here clicking on. And so what first thing I did is I put them in a custom menu set to disable delete, right? No, don't deleting for you. Thank you. Removing that from the menu bar, the delete button is another one of those little moments where it's a sharp edge in FileMaker, the sharp point in the FileMaker platform that's not easy to manage. It's not easy to set up unless you roll your own status toolbar, which in itself is not an easy item if you really do it correctly. It's a pain in the ass. And so I decided that I didn't want to roll my own status toolbar. Chasing the bugs in the status toolbar would be a pain in the ass. And so with 2 people, I said, please disregard the top inch and focus on everything below. And then in the future, as you start to have more records in here, then the idea of doing fines and things, because they're right now to the point, this is actually their system right here. I have a couple test records. These are big projects here they're working on. And as they work on these, it's their first couple records, but there's a lot of line items in here, all the issues that they're working on in terms of remediating the maintenance on the aircraft behind me. Right? Or installing this one over here in front of me, they're installing a spray system so they can spray and keep the bugs out of the crops, right? Or spray fertilizer on them or whatever they do, right? That's all the stuff that goes on. That's how we feed the planet. You have to keep the bugs out of the stuff, or they eat all your food and then you have nothing. So yeah, they use aircraft for that. That's a very, very popular thing. So questions along the way, Margaret? Well, Kyle says we often hide the toolbar for end users. Oftentimes we need to control the fines. Yeah, I agree with that. It's not, listen, the toolbar, I think you have to take on a case by case basis. I actually sat for probably an hour all told over a couple of weeks thinking about what I should do with it. And I ended up just explaining these guys for the time being, leave it alone. I'm going to leave it on screen in a lot of situations. So let me dive through this. Margaret, if you want to move me around a little bit, I'm going to close my on-screen deal here.
So I will.
I'm going to go to full screen over here. So this is, you guys will recognize this is, and I've zoomed in on it a little bit, but this is essentially the FM starting point 23 Lite. And it's kind of an X2 one. It's and it's got some things in here, some improvements in here, essential improvements, gaping holes that are in the platform. And I hate telling customers no. 99% of it, but that or 98% of it's awesome. And that 2% are a big, rusty nail looking up to stick you in the shoe if you step on it. So, and one of the fixes here is from Kyle. And as I go through, I'm going to kind of do a short version of these fixes, but I'm going to do a deep dive on them in future live streams with you, right? One on the monkey bread fix that I implemented, and another one with the Kyle Williams fix from a demo file they did for us a year or 2 ago. And so what I want to do is simply point out that we have contacts, we have aircraft work orders, or AKA jobs or projects for the aircraft, right? It's pretty straightforward stuff. So the issue number one, that where the rubber meets the road with this stuff, is really funny. So most of the time, and because they're doing maintenance, this aircraft right here, this is a test record, has 55 discrepancies. This one right here has 93 discrepancies. It's actually, I think, a 1971 model, and it's almost no upgrades on it. But they still do the maintenance on it. And so it comes in here and they're tearing it apart, looking for issues, fixing things, doing it, what they call an annual inspection, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so far there are some items that were kind of pre-canned that we loaded in here. So I could go on the system and say, load a pre-canned set of discrepancies. These are the ones that you expect. So it puts in like 50. Well, there's another 40 little small things that they discovered so far that have to be remediated, right? So once again, this is the NIC interface, but once again, I've dumbed it way down for someone like me, much simpler. Over here, I've got some primary keys so I can keep track of some things. Those will eventually go away. And they actually don't show up they show up as an admin user, but if you're below an admin or what we call full access, right? The privilege set name is full access. It's actually not admin, it's called full access. It shows these if you're below a full access or anything else, it hides some of these little indicators, right? Pretty great. And so what happens is that they're in here clicking away, typing on it. Paul behind me is in here typing away. And then he goes back and starts working on the aircraft. And I put this big save button up here to try to encourage them to basically, because trying to explain to someone who's not a FileMaker person, like click out of the fields, right? That's such even on a browser, no one does that, right? Click out of the fields of commit the record, right? It doesn't exist on any planet except the planet called FileMaker, and the world that's run by the King Claris and his empire, the Claris empire on planet FileMaker. So I put the save button here, and all it does is runs a commit. And then conveniently enough, it also will, if I come over here, if I hit the button, I never actually, let me see if let me go to, actually before I change real data, let me change something else here. So go over here, hit save, and then, so a couple things popped up, right? You're like, well, that's not normal. Two issues have come up that I kind of almost expect these things to come up. One is that, so one is that the maintenance guy overseas in Europe and Australia and other places, they call them engineers. In the United States, they're called AMTs or aeronautical mechanical or aviation mechanical technician or whatever, AMTs. But he's editing here and he walks off and leaves the record locked. And so the boss in there tries to come over here and do some edits, and he's locked out. And he goes, well, I'm the boss. The staff who works for me should not lock me out. And it's really hard to have a conversation to explain that he's right, at the same time try to explain that Claris thinks it's not an issue, right? It's only been that way for a million years, right? And so running into each other isn't really the problem. The problem is Claris's technique is to tell you to get off your walk across the building to the other person, tell them to exit the record, okay? No bueno, okay? It's only, how many times we've all run into this? And so I have to explain to a person who knows that paper's out of date and knows that this technology should be awesome because other people use technology like this, have to explain to them that they have to go and walk and yell at the other person to fix the record lock. And you're like, whoa, you could redesign the database so it only do edits in the thing, and then it only does a transaction really quickly, and that's only in your dreams are you going to have a small business solution that's going to have stuff like that, because it's very non-FileMaker-y, it's non-normal, non-intuitive to build that way. And so what do we need? We need a way to kick people out of the record, right? Or to forcibly tell them to commit the record as is. Well, as it turns out, most of the time they put some data in here, and then in the use case, if we had the power to do this, would be to force that person to commit, right? Pretty straightforward. And so like, well, there's the first time I have to tell no, and I'm in there with the guy who owns this company, and I'm like, I'm trying to explain to him that yes, you're right, and Claris doesn't give, right? Very awkward conversation to have. And so I was thinking about it, and so then what I tried to do is train him, like, well, here's a save button, and then whenever you get up, press the save button. Of course, they don't give a about that because they're normal humans. They're worried about the job, not worried about you imposing new rules on them. You're not here for that, right? You're here to make their lives better, not here. So I go, think. Oh, whatever we need to solve a problem that Claris has ignored for 30 years, we use monkey bread, right? So then that will be a live stream how we talk about that, where what it does is on idle, and I set it for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, it will actually come over here. And if the user's been idle, now why this is, I've been asking for this for a million years, on idle, right? If it's idle, fire a script. We will worry about it. So what I do is it fires and it checks to see if the record is in a it's opened up the record or it's locked the record because it's editing it. One, and two, you're on a certain layout, in which case then it will execute the safe. So as a professional developer, I've thought about the permutations. I don't want it like someplace else, where it's important or it interferes with the process, but it won't interfere because the person's already idle. Claris has a timer that will detonate, right? It's like pulling the pin on a grenade. The grenade doesn't detonate when you're idle. It detonates after 5 seconds, whether you like it or not, right? It blows up. So that's useful in some cases, and I almost never need that. But what I do need is for it to do something if the person has walked away, right? So I built the ability to install the plugin automatically, to register the plugin automatically, and then it starts this command running, and so if it's idle here, and if I sit here long enough, it's going to do the safe thing. So that was one issue. The other issue I have is that we tell people is that happens in FileMaker. Like if I come over here and I say I want to insert a discrepancy right here, I push this button right here. First thing I did is I said I need a way of letting people know, giving them messages like a transient message, right? Because how would you do this with FileMaker without any extra stuff? You'd click this and it would pop a dialog. You surely should do this other thing. Click OK, right? The road to hell, right? We've got that Margaret, that video that one guy did, Ed, making apps that don't suck, right? And dialogue hell is the first 5 minutes of that presentation, one of the best live streams ever. I would rebroadcast it for you, except I don't know it. I can send you folks a link if we can find that, right? So the idea is the pop-up looks like Kyle. It is from Kyle. We're going to talk about that. So we need a way, and I talked to product management about this at Claris. I said, we need a transient notification system for people. Well, if you click over here, and what I want to do is that a lot of times things sleep. You don't want to just be clicking and cause deletes and things to happen. Same thing with delete over here. You want to delete. It's giving you a clue that it wants you to hold a modifier key down to do that. So I press this button over here. It does this thing. It does this insert. This was unnecessary message up here because it's pretty obvious. I put this up here because it was going slow and I did a handoff to PSOS to do some of this to make it go faster. That being said, it pops up right here. It's pretty obvious that you press the button and it happened, okay? Pretty straightforward. But if I come over here and say, I'm changing this is actually not a 300-hour inspection. It's we're gonna change the oil on the beaver. I don't even know what that means. It sounds horrible. You're gonna grease the beaver, okay? Okay, now I can press this button here and it says, hey, go back to the library and update this. Once again, these are little hidden indicators that only I see. So I say this update. Well, if I run an update, it's going to grab it from here, put it somewhere else. I'm assuming it worked because FileMaker normally would never tell you it worked, right? There's no indication, no way of this transiently saying to the customer, yeah, it worked. Their answer is to throw a dialogue that's modal that requires interaction, right? There's no transient non-modal notification system in FileMaker, even though every product on the planet has it. Right? Just about, right? So if I press the button right here, it does something invisibly, and then it throws an update there at the top, and I can change the colors from green to yellow or orangish color to red. So good warning to okay? And you can pass those messages. And all I have to do is call the script, give it the message, the color, you're done. So there were 2 gaping holes in the platform. So you have to be prepared to cover little issues in the platform, so you don't have to say no to the customer, right? You want to say yes to them and their needs, right? That's really, really, really basically important. Yeah, Kyle's talking about. So yeah, Kyle's taking a victory lap. Yeah, it's absolutely one of Kyle's add-ons. So I don't know if it's an add-on per se. I copied custom function, a couple scripts and stuff. So we'll talk about it later on in another live stream, but it's an important ability to do this transient sort of, in fact, Margaret, if you want to find the links to that for the indicators and whatever version 2 file, right?
Is it in Wolfpack, Kyle? I didn't keep track of the list of. I don't have the list somewhere. of words. Oh,
Yeah.
well, in that case,
You
I'll
know,
just link Wolfpack.
no, it works pretty good in here. So it's so good. And then of course I end up finding his old version of it. So it has a dependency on going to Google and downloading something. I'm going to upgrade it a little bit so it's self-sufficient, so it's not going out on the internet. But going on site and working with the customer and watching their reaction and them fumbling, or whenever they fumble around, they're learning. But the question is, should you have done something better? Could you have done something better to make their lives easier? Like they were in here typing away in here, and then they were like, "Oh, I got to figure out how to spell something, right?" And there's a spelling in here, and that's really helpful, right? Helpful to figure that out. And they're like, "Well, what's a soup?" Like I tried to figure out if you have a canned action, right? And a canned action, canned. How do you express a pre-canned action, right? So we got the soup indicator in here, right? It's like, oh, I go over here and click the soup indicator, and then there's a card style window, and then maybe you have a whole bunch of things in here, right? You could say, well, maybe I'm looking for a canned answer that start with inspected, right? And so then it comes up with the matches up here, and you can select one, or you can add a new one, right? But the idea was it was canned, right? And so, the indicators, it pops up automatically, so they don't have to type it. They just select high traffic items as rapidly as possible. If they change the status to completed awaiting approval, that means that they think it's done, and then the person above them needs to come and certify and sign off on it, right? And then once that happens, then you don't want it changing anymore, and we get rid of the can, right? So all this is workflow, understanding workflow, working with the customer to figure out the workflow, and then taking the lessons we've learned collectively from this group, learning from Kyle, learning from Calvin, learning from Christian Schmidt at Monkey Bread. I had to say no all over the place if it wasn't for Kyle and Christian Schmidt, right? But these guys built essential little nuggets of awesomeness and then kind of got it out to us on the live stream. And then we come back and, we solve problems. Now, these two areas, as nice as I say, Claris, we've been asking them these for about 1 billion years, and it should be something that's built into the product. I shouldn't have to, think about it, investigate it. And of course, the first time the customer, they come to me and they're like, well, we keep running into each other and we have to keep walking across the hangar bay here and all this sort of thing and telling each other get out and all this sort of stuff. And they're like, well, can't you make that better? And if it wasn't for some of these things, the answer would be no. You start having to say no. I don't want to. I hate saying no, right? I mean, unless the customer's an hat, right? Then no. So, yep. So the notifications are good. We did a live stream on that, and I will probably go back and do another live stream in this. So this is starting point. What we started about was starting point light 23. I found a couple bugs along the way, so we've been back patching starting point, but going through here. But it seems to me that the record locking thing is such a pain in the ass in getting people to exit. That should be built in, and the notification kind of scheme should be built into starting point, because everyone needs it, right? Because we all know not to throw dialogues up. Now, a lot of times you'll do something and put like a little round like checkbox up or something like that, but it's only a little tiny icon. And what if you need more feedback than that? Like if I tell the system over here to do an insert over here, there's about 5 or 6 different messages that can come back on this, because I was very interested. It says success with PSOS, but PSOS could have a GTRR failure. Can't do a good related record for whatever reason. Doesn't exist. We should try that actually. If you create a new deal over here and so then you'd always have a GTRR there, right? So yeah, but I see anytime you do a GTRR, you do a find, things like that, you always want to error trap for that. And so it just occurred to me that you couldn't hit the button unless some record was there. So you'd always have at least one record on the GTRR. But what if you coded it and it failed, right? So it'll come back with a red message and say, hey, this has failed. All right, question. Stu's typing something.
How to convince a customer that hasn't heard of FileMaker?
Well, that's kind of the trick with this stuff, right? So I think that the biggest thing that I would tell you is like it goes along the question we had: who is Claris and can I trust them? And that's a really it's a weak conversation to have because no one knows what Claris is. There is a lot of brand equity in the word FileMaker. What I would pitch it is it's owned by Apple. People know what Apple is. Some people know what FileMaker is, so I would not even go down the road of trying to explain what Claris is, except that it's a department or division or work group that works and is owned by Apple, and they are in an Apple building, right? And so I would talk about it being an Apple product, and you have the back, and Apple does security testing on the product to ensure that it's, pretty secure and not stupidly hackable by people with bad intentions. We've talked about that. So yeah, so there's a couple really important things that the product doesn't do, even for beginner or intermediate people. The record locking issue without a way of managing that or remediating it sucks. And then the transient notifications without throwing a modal, some sort of dialogue that the person must actively engage in. Kyle's got some of his indicators are modal or not modal, but they won't automatically dissipate themselves. But yeah, interesting. So cool. Questions from the
We got another question, but also Christian has a good comment. The customer also will buy your great solution. They don't often care before the underlying software used to make it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, for me, it's with this operation down here, it's kind of unusual. This is I knew these guys for a while, and they finally figured out that they would take a swing and let me. I wasn't actually trying to sell to them. In fact, if it was up to me, I wasn't going to try to sell it to them because I'm a CEO and I don't have time to be building software. But they really made the pitch that I should do this, and I went, okay, fine, I'll go do this. And so now, of course, I'm going back to redoing development, and I haven't done serious development in 7, 8, 10 years, right? So for me to go back and get in there and learn and be fast and quick and so it's been a good exercise for me. It also reminds me of the basic crap.
I'm not sure. Rolling your own toolbar with custom menus sounds like a good idea for an add-on, but I'm not sure whether custom menus can be controlled with an add-on. Anyone know if you can or not?
Listen, we tried using add-ons the other day and they broke. We couldn't get them to work at all between FileMaker 19.6.3 and creating an add-on with the export XML thing. It wasn't me doing it. It was Christian Olson, different Christian. He's the Wolfpack guy, and they were having huge add-on problems with it. So where it wasn't bringing things across, it was crashing, it was doing bizarre. This is with like Starting Point and Wolfpack. And so I always hate to recommend add-ons because the last time I tried it 2 weeks ago, it did not go well. Yeah, because we had another solution we were trying to drag and drop in here. And what we were trying to do is put the ability to capture signatures in here. So these, as they're doing remediation of sign off of these items, they could sign the item with their signature. And so the easiest way of doing it would be drag and drop an add-on, but it was not cooperating as well as it should have otherwise. So it's once again, the idea is about getting in front of customers, but being there. They don't realize when they're going to need you, but when you need to be there before they need you. And that's how you remediate the issues and stay on top of it, right? So there goes trouble right there. In fact, he's got paper in his hand right there. He's got paper in his hand. Don't use that paper. Use FileMaker. They're likely to come over and give me the bird. I gotta be careful. All right, well, very exciting. Kyle says sometimes people create their own CRMs with Excel. Excel very dimensional limited. Yeah. The aviation business is filled with Excel everywhere. So yeah, that's kind of common. So in fact, Excel, the spreadsheets from Excel hell are there. So yeah, no, I don't want to keep a bunch of people too late today, but I want to thank the team here because once again, if it wasn't for Kyle, I'd have to solve the transient notification some other way. And then Christian Schmidt with Monkey Bread with giving us the deeper on timer. It was the one of them was doing weird shit on Windows. It started looping and blowing stuff up, but he had two similar commands. The other one where it fires once after you're idle for a period of time, but it doesn't keep firing every 3 minutes or every 5 minutes. It doesn't re-engage until you move the mouse around, do something. Then it starts watching again to see if you're going to hit that idle period, right? You walk away, it starts counting, right? And you haven't touched the mouse, move the mouse, and then after a certain period of time, it fires a script. So run on idle, FM run idle script. Yeah, that was the one I started with, but it would, I started running into a deal where it would start looping and firing and doing crazy shit. You might want to test that on Windows 11 on FileMaker. But anyway, then I used the other command that Christian had. So we're going to have Christian back to talk about this.
I appreciate Christian Schmidt's comment if you see it in.
He said we had barbecue
No, before
earlier.
that, FM run script idle, run something on idle once, and because people needed more, we have 40 scheduled.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, but the basic idea is just to trip a script like a doctor, like a doctor is using the software, and they have all this HIPAA regulation in the United States, and as soon as someone is walks away, they need to log out. But what if they forget? Well, if they forget to log out, then the system needs to take corrective action at that point to kick them out. Here, we're not worried about them being kicked out. We just want them to commit and save the record, right? Totally different situation. But if these were Hollywood actors in here, jacked up behind us, HIPAA rules would apply, and they really don't want, they want all the information to be secret, and they only want the doctor that's working with them to be in their record, right? Kind of stuff, so that it logs them out. The on idle event trigger is, we've only needed it for a million years, and it's still not there. So Christian Schmidt is gainfully employed. So yeah, so thank you, Claris, for gainfully employing Christian Schmidt. Thank you, Clarice. Right?
Otherwise, I think we're good. I
We're good.
see. Yep, a lot of people saying thank you. Today was interesting. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's where the
I'm
rubber
sorry
meets the
about
road.
the technical difficulties. I'm going to say it was Boxcast having a moment. So, okay.
All right, cool. I'll run the closer. Thanks, Marks.
Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!